Utica is a city in the Mohawk Valley and the county seat of Oneida County, New York, United States. The 10th most populous city in New York, its population was 62,235 in the 2010 U.S. Census. Located on the Mohawk River at the foot of the Adirondack Mountains, Utica is approximately 90 miles northwest of Albany and 45 miles east of Syracuse. Although Utica and the neighboring city of Rome have their own metropolitan area, both cities are also represented and influenced by the commercial, educational and cultural characteristics of the Capital District and Syracuse metropolitan areas. Formerly a river settlement inhabited by the Mohawk tribe of the Iroquois Confederacy, Utica attracted European American settlers from New England during and after the American Revolution. In the 19th century, immigrants strengthened its position as a layover city between Albany and Syracuse on the Erie and Chenango Canals and the New York Central Railroad. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the city's infrastructure contributed to its success as a manufacturing center, and defined its role as a worldwide hub for the textile industry. Utica's 20th-century political corruption and organized crime gave it the nicknames Sin City, and later, the city that God forgot. Like other Rust Belt cities, Utica had an economic downturn beginning in the mid-20th century. The downturn consisted of industrial decline due to globalization and the closure of textile mills, population loss caused by the relocation of jobs and businesses to suburbs and to Syracuse, and poverty associated with socio-economic stress and a decreased tax base. With its low cost of living, the city has become a melting pot for refugees from war-torn countries around the world, encouraging growth for its colleges and universities, cultural institutions and economy. Etymology. Several theories exist about the history of the name Utica, although surveyor Robert Harper stated that he named the village. The most accepted theory involves a 1798 meeting at Bag's Tavern where the name was picked from a hat holding 13 suggestions, Utica being included because it is the name of a city of antiquity in Rome, New York, or were to later. History. Iroquois natives and European settlement. Utica was established on the site of Old Fort Schuyler, built by English colonists for defense in 1758 during the French and Indian War, the North American front of the 7 Years' War against France. The Mohawk were the largest and most powerful tribe in the eastern part of the Mohawk Valley. Colonists had a long-standing fur trade with them, in exchange for firearms and rum. The tribe's dominating presence in the region prevented the province of New York from expanding past the middle of the Mohawk Valley until after the American Revolutionary War, when the Iroquois were forced to cede their lands as allies of the defeated British. The land housing Old Fort Schuyler was part of a 20,000-acre portion of marshland granted by King George II to New York Governor William Cosby on January 2, 1734. Since the fort was located near several trails, its position, on a bend at a shallow portion of the Mohawk River, made it an important fording point. The Mohawk called the bend Onondagas, and the Mohawk word appears on the city's seal. During the American Revolution, border raids from British allied Iroquois tribes harried the settlers on the frontier. George Washington ordered Sullivan's expedition, Rangers, to enter central New York and suppress the Iroquois threat. More than 40 Iroquois villages were destroyed and their winter stores, causing starvation. In the aftermath of the war, numerous European American settlers migrated into the state and this western region from New England, especially Connecticut. In 1794 a state road, Genesee Road, was built from Utica west to the Genesee River. That year a contract was awarded to the Mohawk Turnpike and Bridge Company to extend the road northeast to Albany, and in 1798 it was extended. The Seneca Turnpike was key to Utica's development, replacing a worn footpath with a paved road. The village became a rest and supply area along the Mohawk River for goods and the many people moving through western New York to and from the Great Lakes. The boundaries of the village of Utica were defined in an act passed by the New York State Legislature on April 3, 1798. Utica expanded its borders in subsequent 1805 and 1817 charters. On April 5, 1805, the village's eastern and western boundaries were expanded, and on April 7, 1817, Utica separated from Whitestown on its west. After completion of the Erie Canal in 1825, the city's growth was stimulated again. The municipal charter was passed by the state legislature on February 13, 1832. The city's growth during the 19th century is indicated by the increase in its population. In 1845, the United States Census ranked Utica as the 29th largest in the country, more than the populations of Chicago, Detroit and Cleveland, respectively. In the latter part of the century, Chicago became a boom town based on resource extraction and processing from the Midwest, and as a railroad center, industry, trade, and slavery. Utica's location on the Erie and Chenango canals encouraged industrial development, allowing the transport of anthracite from northeastern Pennsylvania for local manufacturing and distribution. Utica's economy centered around the manufacture of furniture, heavy machinery, textiles and lumber. The combined effects of the Embargo Act of 1807 and local investment enabled further expansion of the textile industry. Like other upstate New York cities, mills in Utica processed cotton from the Deep South, a slave society. Much of the New York economy was closely involved with slavery. In the antebellum period, half of New York's exports were related to cotton. In addition to the canals, transport in Utica was bolstered by railroads running through the city. The first was the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad, which became the Utica and Schenectady Railroad in 1833. Its 78-mile connection between Schenectady and Utica was developed in 1836 from the right-of-way previously used by the Mohawk and Hudson River Railway. Later lines, such as the Syracuse and Utica Railroad, merged with the Utica and Schenectady to form the New York Central Railroad, which originated as a 20th-century forest railway in the Adirondacks. During the 1850s, Utica was known to aid more than 650 fugitive slaves. It played a major role as a station in the Underground Railroad. The city was on a slave escape route from the southern tier to Canada by way of Albany, Syracuse and Rochester. The route, used by Harriet Tubman to travel to Buffalo, guided slaves to pass through Utica on the New York Central Railroad right-of-way en route to Canada. Utica was the locus for Methodist preacher Orange Scott's anti-slavery sermons during the 1830s and 1840s, and Scott formed an abolitionist group there in 1843. Despite efforts by local abolitionists, pro-slavery riots and mobs, who wanted to protect the cotton mills, forced many abolitionist meetings to other cities. 20th century. To present the early 20th century brought rail advances to Utica, with the New York Central electrifying 49 miles of track from the city to Syracuse in 1907 for its West Shore interurban line. In 1902, the Utica and Mohawk Valley Railway connected Rome to Little Falls with a 37.5-mile electrified line through Utica. By the 1950s, Utica was known as Sin City, because of the extent of its corruption at the hands of the Democratic Party political machine. During the late 1920s, trucker Rufus Elefanti rose to power although he never ran for office. Originally a Republican, Elefant's power was enhanced by support from New York Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt. Waves of Italian, Polish and Lebanese Maronite immigrants worked in the city's industries in the early part of the 20th century. Until the 1980s, organized crime had a strong role in the city, strongly affected by the deindustrialization that took place in other Rust Belt cities. Utica suffered a major reduction in manufacturing activity during the second half of the 20th century. The 1954 opening of the New York State Thruway and declines in activity on the Erie Canal and railroads throughout the United States also contributed to a poor local economy. During the 1980s and 1990s, major employers such as General Electric and Lockheed Martin began to close plants in Utica and Syracuse, with city jobs moved to the towns and villages around Utica during the suburbanization of the post-war period. This led to the expansion of the nearby town of New Hartford and the village of Whitesboro. Utica's lack of quality academic and educational choices, when compared to Syracuse under an hour away, contributed to its decline in local businesses and jobs as some economic activity moved to Syracuse during the 1990s. Residents who remain in the city struggle to handle poverty issues stemming from social and economic conditions caused partially by a smaller tax base. This adversely affects schools and public services. Despite the city's economic decline, it has benefited from a low cost of living, attracting immigrants and refugees from around the world. Among the new waves of immigrants are Muslim Bosnians and Buddhist Vietnamese. Further bolstering the city are its commercial, educational and cultural ties to the Capital District and Syracuse metropolitan areas. In 2010, Utica, the focus of local, regional and statewide economic revitalization efforts, developed its first comprehensive master plan in more than a half-century. Geography. According to the United States Census Bureau, Utica has a total area of 17.02 square miles, 16.76 square miles of land and 0.26 square miles of water. The city is located at New York's geographic center, adjacent to the western border of Herkimer County, New York, and at the southwestern base of the Adirondack Mountains. Utica and its suburbs are bound by the Allegheny Plateau in the south and the Adirondack Mountains in the north, and the city is 456 feet above sea level. The city is 90 miles northwest of Albany and 45 miles east of Syracuse. Topography. The city's Mohawk name, Onondagas, refers to a bend in the Mohawk River that flows around the city's elevated position as seen from the Deerfield Hills in the north. The Erie Canal and Mohawk River pass through northern Utica. Northwest of downtown is the Utica Marsh, a group of cattail wetlands between the Erie Canal and Mohawk River with a variety of animals, plants and birds. During the 1850s, plank roads were built through the marshlands surrounding the city. Utica's suburbs have more hills and cliffs than the city. Located where the Mohawk Valley forms a wide floodplain, the city has a generally sloping, flat topography. Cityscape. Utica's architecture features many styles that are also visible in comparable areas of Buffalo, Rochester and Syracuse, including Greek Revival, Italianate, French Renaissance, Gothic Revival, and Neoclassical. The modernist 1972 Utica State Office Building, at 17 floors and 227 feet, is the city's tallest. Early settlers and property owners contributed to the development of the city, and many families and individuals are remembered in street names. Streets laid out when Utica was a village had more irregularities than those built later in the 19th and 20th centuries. As a result of the city's location, many streets parallel the river, so they do not run strictly east-west or north-south. Remnants of Utica's early electric rail systems can be seen in the west and south neighborhoods, where the rails were set into the streets. Neighborhoods. Utica's neighborhoods have historically been defined by their residents, allowing them to develop their own individuality. racial and ethnic groups, social and economic separation, and the development of infrastructure and new means of transportation have shaped neighborhoods, with groups shifting between them as a result. West Utica was historically home to German, Irish and Polish immigrants. The Cornhill neighborhood in the city center had a significant Jewish population. East Utica is a cultural and political center dominated by Italian immigrants. North of downtown is the Triangle neighborhood, home to the city's African American and Jewish populations. Neighborhoods formerly dominated by one or more groups saw other groups arrive, such as Bosnians and Latin Americans in former Italian neighborhoods and the Welsh in Cornhill. Bag Commemorative Park and Baggs Square West are in the northeastern portion of downtown, with Genesee Street on the west and Oriskany Street on the south. Climate: Utica has a continental climate with 4 distinct seasons and is in the humid continental climate zone, characterized by cold winters and temperate summers. Summer daytime temperatures range from 70 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, with an average winter daytime temperature below -3 degrees Celsius. The city is in USDA Plant Hardiness Zone 5A, and native vegetation can tolerate temperatures from -10 degrees Fahrenheit to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Winters are cold and snowy. Utica receives lake-effect snow from Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Utica is colder on average than other Great Lakes cities because of its location in a valley and susceptibility to north winds. Temperatures in the single digits or below 0 Fahrenheit are not uncommon on winter nights. Annual precipitation is 42.1 inches, falling on an average of 171 days. Demographics: although Utica's population is predominantly European American, it has diversified since the 1990s. New immigrants and refugees have included Bosnians, displaced by the Bosnian War, Russians, Burmese, Vietnamese, and Latinos. More than 15 languages are spoken in the city. Utica has a low cost of living, but its industrial and economic decline have posed difficulties for people trying to make a new start. The city is the 10th most populous in New York, the seat of Oneida County, and a focal point of the 6-county Mohawk Valley region. According to a U.S. Census estimate, the Utica-Rome Metropolitan Statistical Area decreased in population from 299,397 in 2010 to 296,615 on July 1, 2014, and its population density was about 3,818 people per square mile. Counties in the Mohawk Valley have a combined population of 622,133. In the 2010 United States Census, Utica's population was 62,235. Asians were 7.2% of the city's population, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders were 0.1%, and Hispanics or Latinos of any race were 10.5%. Other races were 3.9%, and multiracial individuals made up 4% of the population. Median income for a Utica household was $30,818. Per capita income was $17,653, and 29.6% of the population were below the poverty threshold. Economy: during the mid-19th century, Utica's canals and railroads supported industries producing furniture, locomotive headlights, steam gauges, firearms, textiles and lumber. World War I sparked the growth of Savage Arms, which produced the Lewis gun for the British Army, and the city prospered as one of the wealthiest per capita in the United States. In the early 20th century, the local textile industry began to decline, which had a significant impact on the local economy. The boll weevil adversely affected southern cotton crops in this period. During the late 1940s, air-conditioned mills opened in the southern United States, and jobs were lost as industry moved south, where labor costs were lower because unions were not well organized. Other industries also moved out of the city during a general restructuring in older industrial cities. New industries to rise in the city were electronics manufacturing, machinery and equipment, and food processing. The city struggled to make a transition to new industries. During the second half of the 20th century, the city's recessions were longer than the national average. The exodus of defense companies and the electrical manufacturing industry played a major role in Utica's economic distress. From 1975 to 2001, the city's economic growth rate was similar to that of Buffalo, while upstate New York cities such as Rochester and Binghamton outperformed both. In the early 21st century, the Mohawk Valley economy is based on logistics, industrial processes, machinery, and industrial services. In Rome, the former Griffith Air Force Base has remained a regional employer as a technology center. The Turning Stone Resort and Casino in Verona is a tourist destination, with a number of expansions during the 1990s and 2000s. Utica's larger employers include the Conmad Corporation and Faxton Street. Luke's Healthcare, the city's primary healthcare system. Construction, such as the North-South Arterial Highway project, supports the public sector job market. Although passenger and commercial traffic on the Erie Canal has declined since the 19th century, the barge canal has allowed heavy cargo to travel through Utica, bypassing the New York State Thruway and providing intermodal freight transport with the railroads.